Hi folks, Steve from the Pistol Place here, and today I'll be talking about the WE CT25. It's a replica of the Colt Junior produced from 1950s to the 1970s, though the design is derived from a much earlier pocket pistol produced in the early years of the 20th century. The most obvious feature of this replica is its size. It's utterly tiny. It's barely 4 inches long. Probably the easiest way to show you that is to put it next to a regular sized replica. Here it is next to the WE P38, which isn't a particularly large handgun, but compared to the CT25 it looks absolutely massive. It's available in both black and silver finish. Obviously this is the black one. It has quite a nice semi-matte finish. Looks very much like the original. Despite its small size, I was surprised at the fact that I can get a really good grip on this. I can get 2 fingers onto the grip. It points very naturally. It doesn't feel that tiny when you're actually holding it and you're ready to shoot, which is a very welcome thing, because when you first see it, it looks as if it will be very awkward to actually get a grip of this. It comes in a regular box. It's a card box with a magnetic catch on it. Inside you'll find a foam base with cutout for the magazine and the pistol, and a set of instructions written in not particularly easy to understand English. But hey, who reads instructions? Yeah, I certainly don't, I'm afraid, and that gave me a number of problems. In fact, I thought that this thing just wasn't working because I couldn't get it to fire. Turned out the solution was in the instructions and I had just failed to read them. So I'll discuss the differences between this and other replicas a little later and explain what you need to do to get this to fire reliably. Okay, let's talk about functionality, and that's really very simple here, given that you only have 3 controls. The trigger is single action only. With the magazine out, the safety is applied and the trigger doesn't work. Just like the original, this has a magazine disconnect safety. It will not fire unless there's a magazine inserted in the replica. I do appreciate the attention to detail that WE have put into making this look and function as much like the original as possible, and that's just one example of it. The only other controls you have are a manual safety in front of the grip, fire position down, safe if it's tilted forwards. The manual safety has another function. It also helps to lock the slide back about an inch from its fully forward position. You need that to disassemble the replica, which I'll explain in a moment. The magazine, as you guess, is also tiny. It holds just 7 BBs and not a great deal of gas. Fill valve is in the base, it fills without any problems at all. Magazine inserts and locks in normal way. If it's inserted even part way, that flips the lever that operates the magazine disconnect safety, so you can pull the trigger. Once it's in position, you're ready to go, or are you? Okay, I want to show you what I meant about the problems I thought I was having with this replica. There's gas in the magazine, there are BBs in the magazine. The manual safety is set to fire. If you rack the slide to put the first BB in position, pull the trigger, nothing happens. Now I spent a lot of time scratching my head about this, and I just couldn't understand why this thing wouldn't fire. And it turned out it's part of the functionality that WE have built in, and that means that using this is slightly different to normal replicas. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that and how it works. On the original, there's no slide stop, so when the magazine is empty and you pull the trigger, it just falls with a click rather than a bang, which tells you it's time to reload. WE have replicated that here, so that when the magazine is empty of BBs and you pull the trigger, the hammer falls, no gas is released, and the slide doesn't reset, which is telling you need to reload. But to get that functionality to work, WE have added a control to the magazine that I certainly haven't seen on any other replica. If you look at the magazine, hopefully we can see it here, there is a small black lever there on the right side of the magazine, and when you take it out after you've fired on an empty magazine, that lever will be up in the position you see there. You have to manually reset this every time you insert a fresh magazine by pressing it down like this. Once you've done that, the pistol will fire. You can only press that lever down when there are BBs in the magazine. Hopefully I can now demonstrate by showing you it shooting. There are just 3 BBs in here. What should happen is that all 3 will shoot, and when I pull the trigger for the 4th time, the hammer will fall, but the slide won't reset. Let's try it. Okay, magazine's in, safety's in the fire position. Rack the slide to put the first BB in position. Point the gun in a safe direction, and then okay, there was a slight pop there on the last time I pulled the trigger, but the slide didn't reset. Usually it just falls with a click. Sometimes you do get this small puff of gas. It seems to work very well, and it does replicate the original really nicely, but for this to fire you have to reset the magazine manually every time that you insert it, or this won't fire. Okay, let's talk about disassembly, reassembly. A little bit different to most replicas, and you do need to disassemble this in order to get to the hop-up adjustment, or for lubrication, cleaning, or whatever. So let's quickly have a look at how that's done. First, as ever, remove the magazine. Once you've done that, you want to lock the slide back using the manual safety. Now you want to remove the barrel. Doing that is actually quite simple. It's just not terribly well explained in the instructions. What you do is grasp the end of the barrel, rotate it through 90 degrees, and then you'll find it can move forward about ½ an inch. Then turn it back to its original position and you can take it out of the slide. Once you've got the barrel out, you can see, hopefully on top here, a small slotted screw, and that's what you use to adjust the hop up. Once the barrel is removed, all you have to do is release the slide catch and the slide will move forward and come off the frame. There's a captive spring and pin inside, but they won't fall out when you take it out. Reassembly is simply the opposite, and it's quite straightforward. All you have to do is put the slide back onto the frame. The only slightly fiddly bit is that you have to be careful to make sure that the guide rod is aligned inside. There we are. Then lock the slide back again, Take the barrel, push it in, rotate it through 90 degrees until you can push it all the way in, and then turn it back to its original position. Release the slide and it's reassembled and you are good to go. Before I try shooting this replica, there are a couple of things I want to talk about first. The first thing is the sights. The sights here, like everything else about this replica, are utterly tiny. There are fixed rear sights with a wide notch and a post at the front. Maybe the easiest way to do this is to show you them in comparison to sights on the WEP38. I hope you can see that the sights on this CT25 are just absolutely tiny. With my less than perfect eyesight, I find it really difficult to get a good sight picture with this replica. The other thing is that the sight radius, the distance between the front and rear sights, is very small. It's only around 3 inches. In general, the longer the sight radius, the more accurate the aiming is. This is the shortest sight radius of any replica I've come across. Now, both those things aren't limitations of this replica. They're present on the original and it's just been accurately replicated here. The original wasn't particularly accurate, and because of its tiny sights and its very short sight radius, neither is this. It also has just a 2-inch barrel, which doesn't give a lot of time for a BB to stabilise, so you won't be too surprised to hear it isn't especially accurate, though it isn't as bad as I expected. The other thing I want to say is that this really seems to like heavier BBs. Because it's fairly small, I had assumed it would go for 0.2 gram BBs. When I tried them, even with the hop-up adjusted down as far as it would go, it was over-hopping to the 0.2 gram BBs to the point that they were hitting well above the point of aim. It shoots better with 0.25 gram BBs, though I've seen some people saying that they've used 0.36 or even heavier BBs in this replica and that it deals with them very well indeed. So that's why you'll see that in the Chronograph test I've used 0.2 gram BBs, simply because that gives a like-for-like comparison in terms of velocity with other replicas I've tested. But in the shooting test I'm using 0.25 gram BBs because they hit closer to the point of aim and they appear to give slightly smaller groups. Would you want one of these? Well, it depends what you're looking for. If you want something that is a reasonably accurate target shooter at 6 or 10 meters or whatever range you shoot at, it's not wonderful. It has inherent limitations that mean it's just never going to be that accurate. On the other hand, this is a superb replica of a historic firearm. And in terms of functionality, the attention to detail here is absolutely superb. This functions in exactly the same way as the original. And of course it looks like the original too. No markings on this WE version. There is a Cybergun version of this replica that has full markings. They don't seem to be particularly easy to find. I certainly wasn't able to find one of them for sale. I don't mind that. I actually like the look of it. I think that even the grips and the plastic grips, but they do a better job than most of replicating wood. So if you're interested in a replica of a historic pistol that matches the look and the function of the original, you might be very interested in this. If you're more interested in target shooting, perhaps less so, but despite the fact that it's so tiny, this isn't a novelty item or a toy. It really is a beautifully engineered replica, and overall I would certainly recommend it. I absolutely love it despite its limitations as a shooter, and I'd say that anybody would probably be very happy to have one of these in their collection. Thanks for watching. As ever, there's a link to a full review on the pistol place in the description.